Okay, so our very first lesson, guys, on chapter 1 is on something called unit rates. So we have two vocab words or phrases that we're going to talk about. Here's the first, okay? The word is rate. Everyone?
Rate.
All right, so here's what the book says a rate is. It's a ratio that compares two quantities with different kinds of units. A ratio that compares two quantities with different kinds of units. Now, I want to point this out. I want to point a couple of things out in this definition. First of all, two quantities, which is basically saying two numbers, two different numbers, or two numbers. And with those two numbers, look at, they have different units. We've been talking about units, all right? Some of us, right? Oh, Mr. Wilkins so strict. He wants units on the end of our answers on word problems. Well, I'm trying to get you ready for stuff like this. Okay, get used to the units, being able to identify units. Well, today we're not only dealing with problems with one unit, they're going to have two different types of units. Okay, so we'll get more into that in a bit. So, for example, if we take a look in your little box there, 4 students to 2 desks. That's what that pretty much says. That is a rate. 4 students to 2 desks. The ratio is a 4 to 2 ratio, right? But because it has the units on there, we can call it a rate. 4 students to 2 desks. So I'm just going to use this as an example when we talk about this. Let's say we're doing a group project, and I say, okay, guys, I'm going to break you up into groups of 4. So I'm going to have these 4 students here be a group. I want you 2 to turn around, and you're going to work on those 2 desks. Okay, that's what that kind of means. These 4 students using those 2 desks. Okay, that's a 4 students to 2 desks rate. Okay, now we're going to add on to that a little bit, or expand that a little bit. The next word is called a unit rate. Everyone?
Unit rate.
All right, so here's what a unit rate is. Your book says it's a rate, so it's still a rate, that is simplified so that it has a denominator of 1 unit. Now, a denominator, of course, coming from fractions. We're going to get into that. Okay, but it is a denominator of 1 unit. Now, if you don't quite know what I'm talking about, here's what I'm talking about. We have the 4 students to 2 desks. If we use that same idea, here's what a unit rate is. 2 students to 1 desk. 2 students to 1 desk. So if I'm taking these 4 students here again and just think about it this way. I have 4 students using those 2 desks, but I can kind of break it apart or simplify it and say, okay, these 2 students are going to use this 1 desk. Those 2 students are going to use that 1 desk, right? That's where 4 students to 2 desks is pretty much the same as 2 students to 1 desk. It's just broken apart differently. Okay? Now, here's what I want to also point out. We'll talk more about this in the lesson. Usually with unit rates, it can be written like this, but most of the time, and we're going to practice this today, it is written like this. Instead of writing it as a ratio with 1, it is 2 students. They convert the 1 to this word right here, per. Okay, that's not like the cat purr, all right? That's for 1. So instead of saying 2 students to 1 desk, it's 2 students per desk. Bless you. All right, now, just kind of putting this in perspective, in this lesson in perspective, I want to talk about this just briefly, really quickly. We see the word per, and we see a unit rate, a very common unit rate, in almost in every day. Actually, I'll say this, I'll give you a little hint. We usually see it it's applied when we ride in the car with our parents. What is that famous unit rate? Who can tell me?
Ratio?
Now, I'm talking about a specific unit rate. Another example, instead of 2 students per desk, what would be another example of what we see?
1 person per seat.
Okay, you can say 1 person per seat. Okay, and that is a unit rate, but it's not what I'm quite thinking about.
2 people to 1 car.
Okay, you can say, okay, that you guys are giving good unit rates. This shouldn't be too hard. It's not what I'm talking about.
Miles per hour.
Miles per hour. Guys, we go a rate of speed in miles per hour. You're going on the freeway, all right? And you're going on the freeway, and we turn around, and we go to rate of speed in miles per hour. It's a unit rate, miles per hour. We don't think about it very often, okay? But you hit the freeway, and California law right now is not many people drive it, unfortunately, but on the freeway it's 65. If it's not posted, it's 65 miles per hour. Okay, that means if you go 60, if you're going that rate of speed, a constant speed, meaning it doesn't slow down, it doesn't speed up, you go that same rate of speed for 1 hour, you're going to travel 65 miles. 65 miles per hour. Unit rates, guys, are all around us. Okay, we'll talk more about it in a bit, but when we talk about unit rates, I see it all the time when I go grocery shopping, especially when I go grocery shopping for meat. If I go to the butcher section of the grocery store, if it's Save Mart or Vons or Winco or whatever else, I'm looking at how much a tri-tip is, how many dollars it is per pound. I know that, hey, if it's $2.99 per pound, I'm getting probably a decent deal. If it's $5.99 per pound, I probably want to look elsewhere for my tri-tip. Okay, and you guys might not understand that, but that it doesn't matter how much that chunk of meat's going to cost me. It does, but what it matters is I look at the little sticker and it has the price per pound, the unit rate, or what's called the unit price when you talk about prices. Okay, we'll see some example problems like that in a second. Okay, unit rates are all around us. You'll use them in life. Okay, all right. Before we move on, any questions about just the meaning behind these vocab words or phrases? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Let's go ahead and let's grab our books. Let's grab our books and let's flip over to page 13. Page 13. Bless you. Okay, eyes up here as soon as you're ready. All right, so on number 13, the directions say, on page 13, directions say, find each unit rate. It says round to the nearest hundredth if necessary. So there might be some problems. If you take a look at our place value system poster up here, there might be problems where after the decimal point, it goes longer than 2 units. All right, so 2 units to the right is the hundredths. If that's all it goes, you're good. If it goes 3 units to the thousandths, then you need to round to the nearest hundredth. So just remember that. Okay, here's what they give us for number 3. They actually give us, I'm going to go ahead and do the problem up here. They actually give us not a unit rate, but they do give us a rate. And that rate is 45 and 5/10 meters. I'm going to abbreviate meters just as M in 13 seconds. I'll abbreviate seconds. All right, now we have 45, basically 45 and a half meters in 13 seconds. So here's what I want to do. Step 1 is I want to place this in a fraction form. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the very first number with its units and write it up above, 45.5 meters. I put it in the numerator spot. And then in the denominator spot, I'm going to go ahead and put my second number with its units, 13 seconds. Now here's what I want to do for step 1. Put a little star by our notes and draw an arrow from that star to the units. Ladies and gentlemen, unit rates, ratio and proportions, you will see units this whole chapter. They're extremely important. When we build, this is in fraction form, but it's not a fraction. Okay, this is a rate, it's a ratio, it's a rate in fraction form. You need to make sure your units are there. They're very, very important when we deal with our proportions. Okay? Now, here's what I'm going to do next. Step 2 is I am going to simplify. Or better yet, I'll put down, I'm going to change it to its unit rate. So, now I'm going to keep my same units on top, meters, my same units on the bottom, seconds. I just transfer them over. Okay? And then here's what I need to realize. You might want to put a little star by here. Because it's a unit rate, we don't have to find a number that divides into them evenly. That's not what we're doing here. Here's what we're doing. Remember, our whole goal, finding a unit rate, is have the denominator be a 1. We want to find out how many meters per second this is. So that's why we put our denominator as 1. So when we simplify, that should be easy now. We get from 13 to 1 by dividing by 13. And like you guys already know from dealing with fractions, whatever you do to the bottom, we're going to do to the top as well. So there's our problem to simplify. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go ahead and do 45 and 5/10 divided by 13. Okay? So a little like scratch paperwork over on the side. I need to do my long division. 13 doesn't go into 4. It does go into 45. So I'll kind of do a little dotted line here to kind of imagine just breaking this up. And this is my division problem, 13 into 45. Now, I can cover the last digit of each and go, okay, well, 1 goes into 4 times. And that's just giving me a starting point. All right, I'm just estimating. So I'll go over here again and go, okay, let's find out what is 13 times 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Carry the 1. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 1 is, okay, it's 52 is too large. I'm now going to try out 13 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 1 is 3. It goes in 3 times. I put my 3 over my 5 because that's the last digit of 45. Thank you, those of you that are writing this down, because that's the whole reason why we're doing notes. And so I know 13 times 3 is 39. So when I subtract, I can borrow if I want and just say 15 minus 9 gives us 6. Now, I go ahead, bring down my 5. And, I already tried 13 times 4. It's 52. It's a little smaller than 65. Let's find out what 13 times 5 is. 5 times 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 5 plus 1, and looky here. It's perfect. 13 times 5 is 65. Decimal comes straight up. So I end up with 3.5 on top. Okay, now, step 3. I am going to take my fraction here, and I'm going to write a sentence. I want you guys to get used to this. And ladies and gentlemen, step 3 is a step. It is necessary for tonight's homework assignment on these kind of problems. So please don't just dismiss it and think that this is going to be your final answer. You'll get it wrong tomorrow, so please, please don't do this. Finish this up. Here we go. 3.5 meters. I'll even keep it as an abbreviation if you want. Save yourself some time, but here's what I want you to do. Instead of putting to 1 second, I want you to get used to using the word per. And it's not per 1 second. It's per second. And there's our final answer. It's 3.5 or 3.5 meters per second. Okay, questions?
So to get our unit rate, you just divide the numerator by the denominator?
Okay, be very careful. Okay, that's a fantastic question. And I had this talk with my last period. Okay? Some of us are looking for extremely easy ways to do this without having to write all this. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, you need to write this. I didn't write this as steps. We should by now, this point of the year, realize that whenever I'm asking you to do something, you'll see that again. And many of us have been burned in the past, and not by me, but by yourself, because you're trying to find shortcuts and where we don't have to write as much. And all of a sudden that pops up again later and you're like, whoa, wait, what? I I don't know how to do that. And because you didn't practice the first time around. You will see these sort of things, ratios and proportions, all throughout. Do not take shortcuts. Okay? Now, I'm going to monitor this as much as I can, but if you want to continue trying to take shortcuts and not listening to your teacher, your consequences are going to come in the form of your test scores, believe me. Not because I'm trying to punish you, but because you're going to naturally start getting wrong answers as the problems get more challenging. I'm trying to set you up for success by showing you proper ways to show your work right now. Okay? You're going to see it in the next kind of problem that we're going to do. And it's only going to get more challenging. This is a very basic problem, but I'm having you show your work in a certain way. So many people are trying to find easy ways. Oh, I just need to divide that by that, and I'm going to be done, so I can just write only that. I don't need to show all that. I'll just do that. Okay? And be very careful. Okay? I'm not saying that's what you were asking, but that reminded me to remind you guys. Please don't try to find shortcuts. I'm showing you steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, because I want you to do that. Not because I want you to try to find a shorter or quicker way than what your teacher's teaching you. Please trust in me. Okay? So be very careful with that. Make sure you do that. I'm trying to set you guys up for success where you're ready as the problems get harder. Okay? Okay. Other questions? Any steps that I confused you on? So guys, right? 3 basic steps. Step 1, write your unit rate. Your unit as a fraction in fraction form. Step 2 is simplify it, finding your unit rate. And then on this case, step 3, we already have our unit rate, but I just want you to write it in sentence form. Okay? Any questions? Okay, here we go. I want you guys to try out problem number 4, the very next problem. Okay, problem number 4. I'll check in with you guys in about 30 seconds. Go. Okay? Anyone need more time? Okay? I'll check in with you guys in just a bit. Again, those of you that don't need more time, those same type of problems, go ahead and get going on your homework right now. Use your time wisely. Okay? Don't do other types of problems, but those types right there in that section, you can go ahead and do if you're feeling comfortable with it. Okay, anyone need some more time? Okay, give you about 15, 20 more seconds, and then I'll have you guys share. Okay, when you share with your neighbor, here's what I want you to do. You can start by sharing your answer, but I want you to share your work. I want you to share your ratio here, okay, in a reduced form. Okay, make sure that your neighbor has that as well as their final answer in this form. Okay, all right. 30 seconds. Go ahead and turn to your neighbor and share. Go.
Okay, so I got $1.48. So I divided it by 5 months. So and I got one. So I only 1 pound, and then I did the same thing to see point where it was $7.40, and I got more. I got 1 and 48 because I did
I couldn't figure out how to get there because I took mine and I just got to $1.40 and then multiplied 140 times 5 and I got $7, but I needed $7.40.
you do it too.
Okay, here we go. I'm just going to follow the steps. So before I took this and wrote it in fraction form, that's what step 1 is. So I'm going to go ahead and remember I include my units. So 740 over 5 pounds. Okay. Step 2, I need to simplify into our unit rate, which means my dollars stay on top, my pounds stay on the bottom. And remember, the whole idea of a unit rate is making this into a 1. So when I simplify, I'm going to divide both top and bottom by 5, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, so I do the same thing to the top. So I'll go over to the side, do like scratch paper kind of work. 740 divided by 5. 5 goes into 7 one time, so I put the 1 over the 7. 1 times 5 is 5. I subtract. I get 2. I bring down the 4. 5 goes into 24 without going over 4 times. I put the 4 over the 4 I just brought down. That gives us 20. When I subtract, I get 4. I bring my last digit down, and I like the way this looks because I know that 4 goes into 40 exactly 8 times. I go ahead, I've placed everything properly. I bring my decimal straight up, and I get 1.48, or what is $1.48 over 1 pound. And then, remember, write it using the word per. So this is $1.48 per pound. All right, questions?
I just, like, you added the dollars and pounds together, but on number 3, like, how did you know, like...
All right, wait, I'm sorry, stop for a second. I added the dollars and the pounds together?
Like, you put $1 and 1.48 in per pound, but, like, on number 3, like, how do you know whether to put meters or seconds?
That's a great question, okay? Some of it will come with experience. We won't go into detail about that. As you guys get older, you will, for the most part. And there'll be some exceptions. For this lesson for right now, I don't want you guys to worry about that so much. Put the smaller number on the bottom, or in this case, in the top part, put your first number on top, your second number on the bottom. Okay, when you do your homework tonight. Okay, so that's a great question. Okay, but we could talk about that later, and you guys will talk about it as you get older as well. So I want you to worry more about the math part and all the other things we talked about. So for right now, just do that part. First one on top, second one on the bottom. Okay. Okay, and there will be a couple others that you might not do that, and we'll talk about those in a bit. Some word problems I'll help you guys with. Okay. That's a good question. Any other questions? Okay. So here's what we're going to do. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that unit rate. Let's go ahead, flip back to the previous page, page 12, and let's take a look at number 2. Okay, we're going to use unit rates this time, not finding a unit rate. We are going to find it, but we're going to use it as a tool to solve a more challenging problem. It's not much more challenging, but a little more challenging. All right, so here we go. Take a look at problem number 2. Let's go ahead and close read that. So when I stop, you guys say the word. So after 3.5 hours, Pasha had 217 miles. If she travels at a constant speed, how will she have traveled after 4 hours? Okay, so here we go. Step 1. Okay, step 1 is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this and we're going to write down the rate in fraction form, just like we did before. So you're going to find out that the first 2 steps are pretty much the same. Now, step 1, the only challenging part of this is finding your rates within the word problem. Now, guys, you have to remember the definition of a rate. Okay, a definition of a rate is having two different quantities, meaning two different numbers, and for the most part, we'll have two different units. Now, it's going to be very, very common for a lot of students to go, oh, I know the two that go together. It's 3.5 hours and 4 hours because they're both in hours. And that would be wrong. Okay? Remember, a unit rate is usually based off of two different types of units. Now, just where you know, it won't always happen, but in this lesson, a majority of the time, your two different units that will go together are usually going to be in one sentence. Okay? So, in this case, they're traveling 217 miles in the 3.5 hours. Or it's taken them 3.5 hours to travel 217 miles. Hours and miles, yes, they're different units, but they are related to each other in this story. Okay, it's how far they go in that much time. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Now, talking about which one goes on top and bottom, in this particular case, we know that we're going to the unit rate, right? We always talk about miles per hour. We don't say how many hours per mile, right? It's miles per hour. So that will help us on this one. That allows me to put my miles on top, okay, and my hours on the bottom. So if I take a look here, right, it's 217 miles over 3.5 or 3.5 hours. Okay, now step 2. Step 2 is we're going to find the unit rate. And we do that, of course, we keep miles on the top, hours, or in this case, hour, singular, on the bottom, because we're going to change it to 1. So here we go. I'm going to divide both top and bottom by 3.5, or 3.5. All right, now, maybe for some of you guys, it's been a little while, maybe since elementary school, since you've divided by a decimal. So here's what we have. Just a little reminder. We're going to have 217 divided by 3.5. If there's a decimal in the divisor, meaning that outside number, just a little reminder. We have to get rid of the decimal. Okay, now I could go over where this came from, the history of this, but we're a little short on time, so here's what I'm going to do. Just remember, yes, we're going to get rid of it by moving it to the right, however many times it needs to move. Well, in this case, it's just once. Now, it's kind of like a fraction, like when you're reducing a fraction, whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom. Okay, in this case, whatever we do on the outside, we're going to do on the inside. So I move it over once, the decimal. Remember, there is a decimal right there after the whole number. Okay, so, yep, there's a gap there, so we put a 0 there. Now, I know a lot of us can't stand this, but yes, we need to rewrite this. So we're going to rewrite it as 35 into 2,170. Now, 35 doesn't go into 2. It doesn't even go into 21. It goes into 217. So I'm going to go ahead and cover up the 7 and the 5 and go, okay, 3 goes into 21 7 times. So that's what I'm going to estimate for right now. So I'll go ahead and go 35, go over to the side here, 35 times 7. So let's see, that's 35, carry the 3, 21 plus 3 is 24, too big. So if I try out 35 times 6, that's 30, carry the 3, 18 plus 3 is 21, and that works. So I put the 6 over the 7, and I go ahead and go 210, and I subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. I bring down our 0, and look at that. If you don't recognize it, 35 goes into 70 exactly 2 times, because I know 35 times 2 is 70. And so this gives us a 62 up here. So our unit rate is 62 miles per hour. But we still have an extra step in this problem. You need to answer the question. And we're going to use a unit rate in fraction form to do it. So take a look and reread the question. Remember, the question isn't the whole problem. It's just the part that has the question mark. After that comma, it says, how far will she have traveled after 4 hours? Miles on top, hours on the bottom. So we no longer have 1, we have 4. And now we're not dividing, right? We're going from 1 to 4. We're going to multiply by 4 on the bottom and on the top. So I go over to the side, little scratch paper work, 62 times 4. So that's 8 and 24. And we get 248. Now there is a step 4. And this is pretty important as well. Okay, it's kind of like that problem we talked about where, we had an answer over 100 and they had the question mark on the test the other day. Okay, the question isn't asking you for a fraction. It says, how far did they travel after 4 hours? What's the answer, guys? How far did they travel after 4 hours?
248 miles.
248 miles is your final answer. We only use the unit rate and the rate here as a tool to get our answer. This is your answer, that top section. It's 248 miles. Okay? Questions on that? Well, most of the time. And the reason is because most of the time you'll end up with the 1 on the bottom. So, because that's what a unit rate is. So you're always going to, most of the time anyway, have something like that. Now, sometimes it might be 35 cents per pound. Well, that would be 0.35 over 1, right? So that would be a little different. That happens sometimes. But for the most part, the bigger number, will be on top. Okay? At least for right now. Okay, I want you guys to try out problem number 8. Okay, go. Problem number 8, go. Anyone need more time? Okay. Again, those of you that get done early, get going on your work. Okay, here's what I want you to do. All right, for those of you that are not done, okay, you could just watch and pick up where write down the rest of it from wherever you left off while I do this. Okay, so here we go. Problem number 8. It said Kinji buys 3 yards of fabric for $7.47. Now listen, right off the bat, that is my my rate, $7.47 for 3 yards. Okay, put the smaller number on the bottom like we were talking about. I'm going to find out how much money it is per yard. How many dollars per yard? So here we go. I guess we could finish reading it, right? It says, then he realized he needs 2 more yards. How much will the extra fabric cost? So for right now, let's find out our unit rate. So I divide both by 3. So what I have is I have 747 divided by 3. So 3 goes into 7 2 times. I'm going to go ahead and bring down the 4. 3 goes into 14 4 times. That's 12. And 7, bring it down. 3 goes into 27 exactly 9 times. So I end up with $2.49 per yard for this fabric. But then, right, it's saying how much does it cost for the extra fabric? Well, it tells you the extra fabric he needs is 2 more yards. So we're going to multiply by 2. And 249, guys, times 2 is 498. And that is your final answer. Now, before we go, I just want to say this. Be careful. The better buy, there's going to be a couple questions about what's the better buy. At the grocery store, for example, you need to find the unit rates and compare the prices. All right? Find the unit rates and compare the prices.